talk about a coach and leader of the locker room there in your house. When you said, hey, Daddy's working, I didn't hear a peep after that.
You didn't.
Welcome to the Putback, presented by 888 Sport. Bet $20 on any NBA playoff game and get $88 in free bets with the promo code SNY88. I'm Ian Begley here with Chris Williamson. Chris, what do we have for the baseline this week?
Well, Ian, we've seen a lot of coaches being fired during the playoffs. We saw the Pelicans part ways with Stan Van Gundy, in addition to the Wizards deciding that Scott Brooks will not be coming back. What did you make of all the coach firings and, how that plays into the future?
Yeah, well, first of all, that's one of the toughest jobs in sports, being an NBA head coach, because things don't go well. You could be gone as soon as 1 year into your deal. The one that is interesting is New Orleans, right, with Stan Van Gundy, because with Zion Williamson, he'll be going on to, I think, his third head coach, and that's not good. I mean, you want stability around a young star. We've seen it in the past with the Knicks when there's so much turnover with the head coach position or with the front office. It's never good. So with David Griffin and the Pelicans now, they have to hit this hire out of the park. It has to be somebody who helps push them forward, helps them win games, and meshes with Zion. I think this is a pivotal hire for the Pelicans, and everybody around the league is watching this and keeping an eye on it, because not saying that Zion wants to go anywhere, but when things don't go well and you are a star player, you have the leverage to get out if you want to. Going way back to the NBA draft, I know my buddy Mark Spears had reported that Zion was interested in playing for the Knicks. I had heard the same thing, that he was looking forward to maybe the opportunity if New York had landed that top lottery spot. Obviously, it didn't happen, and I'm not saying that to say that Zion still feels that way. I have no idea, but just to say that a lot of people around the league will be keeping a close eye on that situation, who gets hired and how it goes from there.
This week's guest is Tom Haberstroh, an NBA analyst for Meadowlark Media and also the host of the Haberstroh podcast.
So Coach of the Year every year is the media's My Bad Award, where the media says my bad to the coach that they were hating on before the season or didn't think they were going to win anything. And then, hey, my bad, here's the Coach of the Year award. It's a backhanded compliment, because really what it is me and a lot of other media did not think the New York Knicks were going to be any good this year.
It wasn't just the media who didn't think the Knicks were going to be good. Somebody who knows Thibodeau pretty well, I was talking to this person before the season, and they said, I don't know how he's going to deal with all this losing. Like, it's going to drive him up a wall. Like, I don't know how he's going to handle it, because Tom was so focused on getting the best out of the group, that day and the next day, and not, every coach, no coach really sees the big picture when, they're in the middle of a 6-game losing streak. So this person was almost legitimately concerned about how Thibodeau would handle the losing.
Ian, you've covered the league a long time. You know this. It's one thing to coach offense to young players. It's another thing to coach defense. And what Tom Thibodeau did with this younger roster, when you have Obi Toppin, you have RJ Barrett, you have Mitch Robinson, you got Emmanuel Quickly, who are coming into this roster with a first-year head coach, their first experience in the NBA, and they're gonna listen to you defensively. That is incredible, an achievement. Tom Thibodeau, to this day, we get on coaches who might be on the older side, not being able to reach young players. Man, Tom Thibodeau proved it this year. He still got it. And I think all these players in that locker room loved playing for him this year. Top 4 defense, man, who saw that coming?
You mentioned connecting to players. He talks a lot about how he spent his time after Minnesota, before getting to New York, visiting with teams like the Clippers, with his buddy Doc Rivers. And he talked about kind of learning things about how do you approach practice? How do you approach game days to keep guys fresher? He went to Golden State as well. He also talked about, he credited Mike Krzyzewski for this, knowing that he had to connect to players. And, as an older guy, he knew that that's difficult. It's a challenge, but it's such an important part of coaching. So he was very aware of that. And by all accounts, he did a really good job connecting with this group, Tom, as you know.
Ian, it was a very turbulent week in June for the Dallas Mavericks, as an Athletic article came out saying that Luka was frustrated about some things going on with ownership and management. Shortly after, GM Donnie Nelson, longtime GM, was fired. How does that change the narrative about the Kristaps Porzingis trade, if at all?
Well, if you look at it from a big picture perspective, in the aftermath of that trade, there was one team president fired. That was Steve Mills on the Knicks side. There was a head coach fired. That was David Fizdale on the Knicks side. And now there's a GM in Dallas who's gone. And I don't know if you can really pin the Porzingis trade on the firing. It sounds like there was a lot more going on there within the front office. The Athletic was reporting about, the front office not getting along because of a rift between Donnie Nelson and other people who were brought in. So I don't know how much you pin that Porzingis trade on the firing, but I think you can say that it's more evidence that it hasn't worked out really perfectly for either side, the way either side would have envisioned. If you want to give the Knicks credit for thinking that Porzingis might have a tough time staying healthy, you can certainly do that. I still think you have to see who the Knicks get with these draft picks, and you have to see what they ultimately do with their cap space before you really judge the trade from a Knicks perspective. And we have to see how Porzingis continues to play over the course of the next few years before you fully judge it from a Mavs perspective. But certainly more evidence that it hasn't worked out perfectly for either side.
The thing that I'm always struck by is shelf life, how long he has to get the players to buy in. So they bought in, like you said, especially on defense, which is not something you often see. Is there a timer on that buy-in, or do you think he's going to be able to ride this thing out for, 5-6 years?
Great question. Pat Riley, Knicks fans know him very well. He has the term, the disease of me. And that's when you have success, that next year is so much harder, because everyone starts thinking they were the reason for their success and they deserve more credit for that success. And it's a big reason why you see so few repeat champions in the NBA, because it's so hard once you reach the mountaintop to get everyone pulling from the same side of that rope to get to there again without feeling this ego check. Is that going to break the lunch pail attitude of just grinding out every defensive possession for Tom Thibodeau going forward? It's a very valid question, is not just with the defensive buy-in, but the long tail effect of Julius Randle playing a gazillion minutes this season. We always think these guys are durable until they're not. I remember Brook Lopez didn't miss a game for the first 5 or 6 years of his league, and then just foot problems came relentlessly for him, and he wasn't able to be that same type of player. So for Thibodeau, I hope that everyone stays healthy for next season, and RJ Barrett's still going to be able to play those kind of minutes, and Julius Randle, but they are going to have to make sure that they are going to play just as hard as this season without the wear and tear that comes with it consistently. So that's going to be a big thing going forward. I've had long conversations with Tom Thibodeau about sports science and injuries and injury risk. They were as healthy as any team in the NBA this year. They were really good from that department. And so I think next year, that's the big question for me, is the defensive buy-in and also that team health. We'll see what happens.
So Tom, I definitely want to hear more about the conversations you've had with Tom Thibodeau about rest and sports science. But you make a great point about Julius Randle. I just wanted to add that I know that internally that is a factor here. And I think that they want to have someone in place, whether it's Obi Toppin or somebody else, that's going to be able to give them 10, 15 minutes a night backing up Julius Randle, so they don't have to play him 38, 39, 40 minutes each night, and because they know that he will wear down eventually. They don't want that to happen. So I think part of their thinking going into this offseason is we need somebody who we can count on 10, 15 minutes a night, whatever it is, to give Julius some more time, some more breathing time during a game. So with Thibodeau, those conversations, were they at Sloan? And can you tell us a little bit more about them?
Yeah, at the MIT Sports Analytics Conference, the Sloan Conference, which is commonly known as Dorkapalooza. Man, he's a star there. And you know this, when you talk to Tom Thibodeau outside of the gym, he's as charismatic as they come. He's a great guy to hang out with and talk hoop. I've had those conversations man, Derrick Rose, Jimmy Butler, look at these minutes. And he comes back to both the old school and the new school. He will talk to your head off about Michael Jordan and what Michael Jordan did in his heyday. If he can do it, these kids can too. And I'm always saying, well, Michael Jordan's Michael Jordan, right? Not everybody can be on the same level as that dude, right? You shouldn't hold Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickley and Mitch Robinson and Nerlens Noel to Michael Jordan standards. It's just unapproachable. But at the same time, Thibodeau in those discussions is on the phone all the time with P3 Sports Science in Santa Barbara, California, which is one of the biggest sports labs, biomechanics and sports science labs in the world. And so Tom Thibodeau is actually very much in that next level thinking, cutting edge thinking with P3. I know that they've had conversations, and I know he brings a lot of his guys over there to just get checked out, to make sure that there aren't any abnormalities or any things that could be red flags going forward, and maybe change mechanics or change minutes or have something, a program to make sure that they lower the risk of injury. So Thibodeau has definitely listened, but he still has his old traditional methods, which are traditional for a reason. They've worked year in and year out. And you saw this season, even though they're high minutes, he got a lot of success out of that. My question is just when you're looking at what the real goal is, winning a championship, I don't think you can grind these guys to the bone in the regular season. 1 year is fine because, hey, we're the Knicks and we're not supposed to do anything this year, and they're going to keep continuing to play these guys huge minutes because they're winning and they're doing a great job. But we don't want burnout against the Atlanta Hawks in the first round, and I think that's what you saw this year is a little bit of the burnout and just running into a wall there. And granted, the Atlanta Hawks are a really great team, but the next step is beating the Atlanta Hawks or beating the next coming of the Atlanta Hawks or the Philadelphia 76ers and trying to progress into that Final Four in the NBA playoffs. And you can't run these guys into the ground in the regular season. I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch next year.
For Tom Haberstroh and Chris Williamson, I'm Ian Begley. That's it for this week's episode of The Putback, presented by 888 Sport. We'll see you next week, everybody.
How long do you expect Tom Thibodeau's Knicks tenure to be? That's the subject of this week's SNY Fan Choice presented by 888 Sport. Bet $20 on any NBA playoff game and get $88 in free bets with promo code SNY88.